I was born in Northfield, Minnesota, and grew up there, educated there, went to college at Carleton. And the one thing that I always wanted to do as soon as I found out that I could read was to read books and write books. I wanted to go into a bookstore and pick up a book and see my name on it and think that's a thing that I made. Unfortunately, it turns out that's kind of difficult to do. And you can't easily monetize that. So fresh out of college, I really had no idea what I was doing, and worked a number of different jobs until I ended up in dental insurance. And you might not think that's a good use for an English degree, but it turns out that communications is always useful, whatever you're doing. But I never really did love it. And I had started writing a book on my own time way back in 2005, and this was a fantasy novel called Ember of Dreams. And it remains my mother's favorite book that I've ever written. Most of the rest of the world has no idea that it exists. It is available on Amazon, but you would not normally know that by looking at the sales rankings. I worked on it for several years, and then all fired up with completing it, sent it off to a bunch of publishers, some of whom I never heard from again, and the rest of them, I've got about 36 rejection letters in a folder upstairs. Nobody wanted it. They said it was too long or just not what they were looking for, and that was that. So I decided to self-publish it as an ebook on Amazon, and I did, and I sold about 50 or 60 copies, I think, total. And it's still out there, but this obviously was not going to be my retirement fund. So I continued on with my day job. And around in 2013, some friends and I got together for a gaming group, a role-playing game. And so it was sort of like the host murder parties that people have, where people take on the roles of different characters in a crime mystery and try to solve it. And so my job was to create the cases, and then the other players would each play the role of a detective trying to solve them. And we did this for about 2 years, in which I came up with a new murder about every week or every other week, which was an insane amount of extra work. And I thought of it as being like a TV series, like all of the many, many murder mystery series that are so popular out there. And we all had a lot of fun with it, and we told a good story, and that was really all that I thought about it, until at the end of the story, we moved on to other things, and I thought, well, there might be a book in this, actually, looking at the characters. We had this deep, rich number of people that had created dozens of characters and told this complicated story of crime and mystery and betrayal and criminals versus cops, cops versus other cops, criminals versus other criminals. And so I decided to write a first novel about it. And so the main character, Erin O'Reilly, is a New York policewoman with her dog, who's a German Shepherd named Rolf. And Erin O'Reilly was created by my wife, Ingrid. And so this, I can't take credit for making up Erin myself. I'm getting a little bit of an echo here, by the way. I think somebody's microphone is... Okay, I think we're good now. Sorry. So anyway, I can't take credit for creating Erin myself. That actually comes from my wife, Ingrid, who is on this call, I believe. So full credit, Ingrid, for creating a fascinating character. And anyways, I worked on the book for about a year and discovered that writing a novel, even if you already have a pretty good story, if you want it set in the real world, requires an awful lot of research. And So the first thing that we did, really, Ingrid and I, was we joined up with the Burnsville Police Department Citizens Academy to learn about real police and police work. And they did a 14-week class where one evening a week we'd go and talk to the cops about different police procedures. So I learned how to do traffic stops, sobriety tests. I can now tell if you're drunk by doing the fingertip thing in front of your eyes. We learned about firearms. It's the only time in my life I've actually fired guns. Likewise, Ingrid, for somebody who dislikes violence and weapons, is a frighteningly good shot. Also, at the graduation of the class, I did what I still think is the greatest sacrifice that I've done in pursuit of my art, which is I've always feel like. I do not recommend it. Being tased hurts a lot. There's a video of that bounces around my Facebook account every so often. And so eventually I finished writing the book, and I did not try to get it published immediately. I lost a little bit of my morale, unfortunately, after the experience with self-publishing. And so I just sat on it for a while, started writing the second book, and decided to title them after different drinks, because you have to have a naming convention. You know, like Sue Grafton has her letters of the alphabet, A for alibi, and so on. Mine are drinks. So a Black Velvet, for example, the first book, is a champagne beer cocktail that was invented for the death of Prince Albert in Queen Victoria's times. It's a kind of weird drink. I have drunk one. It's all right, I guess. Anyway, so I just did this as a hobby, just for fun. I thought that maybe my friends and family might like to read them on occasion, and that was that. Until Ingrid mentioned on Facebook one day to one of her friends from college that I'd written a couple of books. And this friend happened to run a small publishing business out of Maryland. And he asked if he could see the first one, and he loved it. And so we agreed to go into partnership, and we would try to sell some books. And because it was a small publisher, the good of it was that I had a lot more creative control than usual. And so we got to have input on the cover design and the layout of it and the fonts, everything. The downside was that we had all of this input and there was a lot of extra work, and we didn't have the muscle of a big publisher behind us. But we were feeling scrappy, and so we decided to do it anyway. And so I'm going to show you an image here, which hopefully you will be able to see here. Can you see that okay? Thumbs? Okay. So there's a pretty German Shepherd dog there on the cover. And that German Shepherd is named Bosco, and he's a very good boy who was a former show dog that I met through a friend of Ingrid's from the barn, where she has horses. Then this friend was a photographer, and her sister has German Shepherds. And so anyway, we ended up with access to this beautiful dog, and we photographed him in St. Paul in front of old looking brick walls for a while. If you're wondering what that dog is thinking with that faraway, thoughtful look on his face, what he's thinking is, I would very much like that treat that's about 2 feet in front of my nose right now. And the cover layout was done by Ingrid through Microsoft Publisher. She's a self-taught graphic designer and has been a tremendous help in all of this. And so we eventually got the book ready and published it in 2017. And we sold a fair number of books, and a lot of them went to my relatives. I think that my parents gave me a huge holiday boost by giving them to all of their siblings, which I very much appreciated. But again, I didn't really think this was going to go anywhere much. But it was nice. I had the actual books in my hands, as I'd always dreamed, and it felt nice. And then the following summer, Ben, my publisher, told me about something called BookBub. That's BookBub. And It's an online promotional service that sends out to this gigantic email list, something like 1.5 million readers, book recommendations based on what they say that they like to read. And he said that he thought that if I could get into that, then that would be a great thing for my exposure and it would really change the whole thing. And by the way, he said it costs $1,300. Oh, I said, well, $1,300 is a lot of money. And do you really think this is a good idea? And he said, don't worry, you'll at least break even on it. It'll be worth it. And so we talked it over and decided, if you don't try it, you're always going to wonder. And so we went for it. And we pushed to make sure that we had the second book ready to go when the promotion went out, so that if people liked the first one, they could immediately get the next one, and that then hopefully they'd be hooked for the series. And so I went to work that day. I sat in my cubicle at DCare Dental Insurance, and tried not to think too hard about what was happening, until then I got notification from my publisher that we were selling hundreds of copies of the ebook. And we sold, I think, 5,600 ebooks of Black Velvet that day. So that was crazy. That's one of the best days of my life, right up there with my wedding day. And I don't know, those are probably the only two that compete. And we also sold a bunch of book too, and we made back the initial investment within the first 24 hours. And I've got a screenshot that I treasure, which shows me temporarily, very temporarily, higher in the sales ranking than James Patterson, which just makes me smile. That obviously didn't last, but it was great while it lasted. And then things subsided a bit, but we stayed pretty high in the sales ranks after that for a while. And it turns out that there's a saying in the business world, nothing succeeds like success. And once you've sold a lot of books, then people start assuming that you know what you're doing and that you're a good writer, and then other people will get a look at it. As long as people know you exist, you've got a chance. Then at that point, the work can speak for itself. And so we went on for a bit there, and a couple months later found out that that first week on BookBub had gotten us onto the USA Today bestseller list. Barely. The USA Today list, my understanding is, has 150 authors on it, and we were number, I believe, 149. So hanging on by the fingernails, but we made it. And so now I can say USA Today bestselling author forever. So whenever you see a bestselling author thing on the title of somebody's books, what that means is that they've had at least one really good week. And so I continued to do my day job. I still wasn't making enough money to have it as an income. But I continued to put out more books gradually in the series. And eventually then, well, COVID happened. And here we all are remoting in instead of me standing in the Northfield library. And this has been a very difficult thing for everybody. And one of the things that happened to me was partially because of that, partially because of other processes. My position at DCare Dental was eliminated in June of last year. And my first feeling was tension and stress. And then almost immediately after that, I felt a vast sense of relief, which told me that it was probably time to move on from that job anyway, and maybe they'd done me a favor. And so I talked it over with my wife, and we thought, well, the books have been doing really well lately. And with people staying at home and not able to go out to movies and dances and whatnot as much, then people were buying more books, I think. And so we thought, why not just give this a try? Treat it as an opportunity to write full time and see if I can turn out more books. And we'll see if we can make it work. We'll figure out the insurance piece of it somehow. And so that's what we've done since then. And here we are. So that's the story, the brief story of my life, and how I sort of accidentally fell into being a professional author, which is now what I am. So, about the books themselves, for those of you who don't actually care about Stephen and just want to know about Erin O'Reilly. they're a series about a policewoman in New York City and her dog, who, in the first case of the series, she's been a veteran cop for a while, but ends up falling into a really big case in which a police officer is killed during a botched art heist, and she has to solve the crime because she feels a personal responsibility for the officer getting killed. And at the end of that book, minor spoiler, she becomes a detective with the NYPD. And she then meets a new squad of detectives, along with some other very colorful characters in the second book, Irish Car Bomb. And then she has various adventures, and the series charts her progress as a detective and tries to explore some of the issues of police work in the process. And so each book is its own story. There's a case that happens in each one that is always solved in some way, but not always closed. Sometimes, the bad guy might get away for a little while, or someone might get killed, or something like that might happen. It's not always clean and tidy. But then, at the end of each one, the characters are not quite where they were before. It is an episodic series, but it's a series that has momentum. If you were to come in and start reading, say, book 6, I try to make it accessible, but it's better to start with book 1. So I would always recommend that. And so I was careful to make sure that it says book 1 on the front cover, book 1 on the spine, and all over, because I hate when series just say a book in this series and don't tell you which one it is, and you have to guess. Then, partway through writing the series, I realized that we were also formatting it kind of like a TV series would be, which is to say that there's seasons. The first 5 books are season 1. And so the 5th book has a big, high-stakes, messy case that then kind of ends with a bang and a little bit of a cliffhanger. And then season 2 ends the same way with book 10, which is the most recent one that has been published. And then the overall series also has an arc that will lead to an end point that will happen in the future. The series will not go on forever, unfortunately. However, it's going to be a good long series. What we're currently picturing is about probably 5 seasons, so call it 25 books, roughly. But we'll see how we go. Things may get a little out of hand. The initial plan was 10 to 15 books, and so it's grown. That said, with the exception of the first case, all of them are based on stories that I initially ran around a dining table for a group of friends, with them trying to figure out the case. That said, I've taken grave liberties with the source material. They're adapted for books, so to speak. I have a question in the chat asking, will Rolf live that long? Well, the overall story arc will run probably about 3 years of in-world time. And that's well within the career of a German Shepherd K-9. K-9 dogs live, they usually will be retired between age 7 to 9 because the job takes a pretty heavy toll on them physically, unfortunately. And they give it everything that they've got every day. K-9s are incredible. One of the things that I've learned in my research about them is that they can do just about anything. A very fast human being can run about 15 miles an hour. Your average German Shepherd can run 30. Don't try to outrun a dog. The dog will catch you. They can go over a 6-foot-tall chain link fence faster than a person can. The only thing that'll really stop them is a closed door. So on the subject of research, you got to do a lot of it. In addition to the Citizens Academy, I read a bunch of police memoirs, 2 very good autobiographies of NYPD officers, one who became a detective. And I wanted to get a sense of what the world was like for them, how they think, how they talk, how they experience things. Because while I'm writing fiction, and this is very much fiction, this is a TV series version of cop life. This is not what actual cops are quite like. I wanted real police to at least see something familiar there and not to think that it was completely ridiculous. And so that brings us to, what am I trying to write? And I think that what makes good stories is the same thing that makes good history. Bad history that people learn in history class in school talks about what happened and when it happened. It's all names and dates and events. And I love history, and that can be boring to me. What matters to people is who it happened to and why it happened. And in fiction, it's the same way. What happened is not nearly as important ultimately as what it happens to. I got a private question here that I'm going to be trying to answer while I'm going into this. Let's see if I can multitask. Just 1 second. I'll just say it. I had a question. How do I structure the foundation of the book before I actually write? That's a good question, so I'll just answer it now. I have case notes from when I originally ran the cases that say who done it and why. And like what I know what initially happens, what the case looks like when the detectives arrive. Otherwise, I don't outline. I just start at the beginning and I write right through it. And I let the characters find their way. I usually know who they're going to talk to at rough points along the way, and I know where they're trying to get. I know how it comes out. I know how the whole series is going to end. I'm not going to tell you. That would be horrible cheating. So, yeah, I know a lot of people, especially with the mystery genre, do a lot of careful outlining. I do not. I rely on sort of a gut level sense of pacing and drama and try to make it work. Yeah, we're going to have a question and answer thing at the end. The library has reminded us. Okay, so anyway, back to character. Character is critically important. I feel like the phrase that I saw a long time ago that says the worst phrase you can hear about a story is, I don't care what happens to these people. That is absolutely true. That is the kiss of death for a story. I want people to follow the story not to find out who killed the victim of the week. I want them to follow the story because they like Erin and Rolf and Vic, the grumpy Russian detective, and Lieutenant Webb, the worn-out gumshoe from LA, and Carlisle, the smooth Irishman, and Corky, the less smooth but arguably more charming Irishman, and so on. I love these characters. Writers often say that their characters feel like real people to them, and that is definitely true. I often, when I'm writing their dialogue, feel like they're talking to me. I can hear their voices in my head. And even with the accents and everything. So sometimes a character will come up with a revelation or a plan that I don't know how they came up with it. And I feel like they're telling it to me as it happens. And that's the most exciting part of writing for me, is just getting to learn that I'm finding out what happens to some of these people and why they're doing what they're doing. So for that, I write in a very particular voice for Erin O'Reilly and for the series. And I take a page from the writer Elmore Leonard, who wrote a very large number of thriller novels until his until he passed away back in 2012. He said once that when writing, he leaves out the parts people tend to skip. And that meant lengthy, flowery description, messy internal thought processes. What he thought was important was dialogue and action. And for writing a mystery, I think that's the right kind of voice to use. And Erin herself is a very no-nonsense cop, so I try to write it like she would tell it. And so she doesn't fill it up with a lot of extraneous detail. She mostly just says, okay, I said this guy said this to me, and then we went there and did this thing because it seemed like a good idea. And whereas Ember of Dreams, when I was writing a fantasy novel, is much more deliberately poetic description and a little more archaic sentence structure, and different characters talk different ways. I feel like it's important to be able to know who's talking almost without having it say, Carlisle said such and such. The way he says it, if you know Carlisle, you'd recognize his voice sometimes. And in the course of writing the series, I've been experimenting with spin-off stories. Book 9, Flashback, which was a book that dealt with the theme of post-traumatic stress, both in combat soldiers and in police officers who have had traumatic experiences. I included, as a bonus in the print version, a short story from the point of view of an Afghan war veteran who ends up associated with organized crime and is a secondary character in the series. And it details a very unpleasant thing that happens to him in Afghanistan that's talked about in the main story. And that gave me a chance to try out a completely different voice. And that was a lot of fun, really. He's a very terse, no-nonsense, business-like kind of guy who is slowly losing his mind over the course of that short story due to dehydration, sleep deprivation, and blood loss. So I hope to do some other spin-offs as well in the future. I've got one in mind for Lieutenant Webb, Erin's commanding officer, that is a prequel that follows his last case when he was working for the LAPD before he transferred to New York City, and details why he needed to leave leave Los Angeles, I mean. That one will be called Pinot Noir, and we hope to put that as an add-on to one of the books this year. So let's see. What am I forgetting? Okay. I have to check my notes here. One of the things that's important to me with writing, especially a police drama series in which, let's face it, an awful lot of traumatic, horrible things happen to the characters, is that there need to be consequences. That one of the things that bothers me in fiction is when a character goes through some just awful, awful experience. Say they get in a gunfight, watch their best friend get killed, and shoot 5 people. And then they shrug it off and go on with their life like nothing happened, and they're not at all changed or affected by that experience. And that is absolute nonsense. I mean, everybody's affected by the things that they experience, and they should be. That's what makes the story matter, is how it affects the characters. And so this is why at the end of each book, the characters are not where they began. They've grown, most of them. Some of them have gotten worse, some of them have gotten better, some of them have gotten deader, and so on. And there's a quote from the TV series The Wire, a very dark and gritty look at police in Baltimore, that one of the detectives in the case, in the series, named Carver, says right at the end, "I used to think that none of what we did mattered, but now I know it all matters." And that's how it should be, I think. So that said, unfortunately, my main characters do go through a lot more than your average cop does. The average police officer has about a 2% chance of discharging their firearm in the line of duty, whether anybody gets killed or not, of actually shooting at somebody, whether they hit or not. Erin, well, I've lost track of the number of times she's exchanged fire with suspects at this point in the series, and it's a work of fiction. That said, I do want to keep it at least grounded in reality and to have it have some sort of realistic impact on her. I also don't want it to be a complete downer, though, so I try to keep it as light as possible within those bounds. The main influences on my mystery writing style, I already mentioned Elmore Leonard, And if any of you have watched the TV series Justified, which is based on Elmore Leonard's writing, that one was a big one for me. Also, the long-running TV series Castle, starring Nathan Fillion and Stana Katic. It had a kind of lighthearted but serious underneath look at the NYPD that I very much liked the feel of. And I can strongly recommend the police autobiography, Blue Blood, by Edward Conlon. That's Conlon. It's a quite long look at the life of an NYPD officer who started out as a patrol cop, worked in the narcotics enforcement unit as a plainclothes officer for a while, and then became a detective, got what they say is the gold shield that you get in the NYPD, and then wrote about the experiences. And he was unusual in that he went to Harvard College before becoming a cop, and his fellow officers often made fun of him for being overeducated for the job. He was supposed to become some sort of high-powered lawyer. If you've ever watched the TV series Blue Bloods, I think it's possible that the character of Jamie Reagan is actually based off of this guy. I don't know. But anyway, that's a great book for what it feels like to be a cop, written by a guy who's a very good writer and good at expressing himself. I also am very fond of Lawrence Block, the mystery writer. His Bernie Rodenbauer burglar series is a wonderful study of characters and snappy, witty dialogue. And I've gotten a lot of enjoyment out of that series. Now, my wife's going to kill me if I don't put in a plug for the current book in the series. So I'm going to show the cover of the most recent one, book 10, First Love. Again, cover designed by her. And it's got a very nifty sort of black and white fading into each other look that really grew on me a couple of weeks ago here. And as I say, this is the end of season 2, so to speak, and it ends with an emotional bang. I will say that this is the first one of the series that I wrote that made me cry at the end when I wrote it. This is not really a spoiler, but I found it very emotionally impactful. And so that is the series to date. And I think that gets me through most of what I was planning on saying here. Let me quick go back over my notes and see if I skipped anything. Oh, I was going to read just a very brief section of First Love that I flipped through to try to find something that didn't horribly spoiler anything that happens either in book 10 or in the earlier books in the series, which is getting increasingly difficult. But I just want to give a sense of how I try to use dialogue and character interaction to develop the characters and advance the plot at the same time. And so this happens when Erin and Rolf have been at a crime scene, and the victim was taken to the local hospital where her brother is a trauma surgeon. And so we pick up when Erin arrives at the hospital. Erin, how many times do I have to tell you I don't want you in my emergency room? Sean O'Reilly Jr. said in mock exasperation. Not coming in on a stretcher, so you don't get to complain, she replied with a smile. How's it going, Junior? She moved in for a quick hug with her oldest brother. Busy day? Not too bad. Better than nighttime and weekend shifts. He gestured around the almost empty ER of Bellevue Hospital. I just got done with an emergency appendectomy. Pretty routine. You hear about that young woman they brought in this morning? Yeah. Were you the one who worked on her? If you can call it that. Sean sighed and ran a hand through his hair. Wasn't much I could do. She was brought in without a pulse or respiration. We gave it our best shot, but it was just so we could look our next of kin in the eye and tell him we did everything we could. Erin squeezed his arm. Sorry. Comes with the territory, he said. I knew that sort of thing would happen when I went into trauma medicine. You just try to focus on the ones you do save. It's the ones I could have saved that keep me up nights. That girl was dead before she got here. Yeah, some medical examiner got here a little ahead of you. Dr. Levine? I think so, yeah. Female, dark hair, poor social skills. That's her, Erin said. Where's Rolf? He asked. I left him in the car with the air conditioner running. He'll be bored. It'll keep him out of the way. Anything else you can tell me about our victim? Just that whoever killed her wanted to hurt her. It looked like she'd been beaten pretty badly around the face and upper body. But the ME will be able to tell you at least as much about that as I can. I wish I didn't recognize it, but we get lots of abuse and assault victims through here. And she didn't say anything? No, like I said, she was non-responsive when she got here. The medics had been trying to resuscitate her in the ambulance, but they didn't get anything either. Have you notified next of kin? Not yet. Has anyone been by? No, we don't even have a name. We didn't even have a name when she came in. No ID on her. We think she's Amelia Bledsoe, Erin said, but we'll need to confirm it. Then you know more about her than I do. Good luck, sis. You too. Say, Erin, you're still coming by for dinner, aren't you? Yeah, I think so. Great. Shelley's been experimenting out of that gourmet cookbook I got her last Christmas. So you're saying I should eat something before coming over? I'm going to tell her you said that. You wouldn't. Erin swatted him on the shoulder. See you at 7, he said, smiling. So that's just a little slice of the life of Erin O'Reilly, professional cop, that shows how professional and family can intersect sometimes. It's nice having her brother as a doctor because that can work in the medical angle sometimes. The reading out loud gives me a reminder that we did arrange with an actor out of Chicago named Christy Alsip to do audiobooks of the series. And so she has completed the first 5 on audio. And so those are accessible through Amazon's Audible program. That, unfortunately, is the only platform currently. We got a plug in the chat for audio. And I think she's very good. She reads with Erin with very good expression and a good kind of street edge to her that I think fits the series. So as far as if you currently read the books, then thank you. You're wonderful. You're great fans, and I appreciate you very much. If you are not reading the books yet and you want to, then you can get them through a number of platforms. The best one probably is Amazon, and they're under the Erin O'Reilly Mysteries. I'll just quick put that there. There we are. And the first one is on a discounted discounted ebook price for 99 cents. So, I mean, really, you've got no excuse for not getting that. It's $1, of which I get about 35 cents. It does add up. And they're available in ebook, paperback, hardcover, and the first 5 as audiobooks, with the 6th one going to come out fairly soon on audio. We will be releasing number 11, High Stakes, and that will be coming out, should be in March of this year. With then number 12, Aquarium, tentatively slated for June. I have written number 11, so it is a thing that exists, and number 12 is almost rough drafted out. Doing it full time has definitely improved my productivity, so I've got a little bit of a buffer here so that I can try to tighten down the editing a little, get it out to the right place. You can also get them through Barnes & Noble's Nook store, or Kobo, if you know what that is. Or you can go to Clickworks Press, that is that again in the chat. That is my publishing house, which is a very small house. Again, I think we've got 5 authors maybe operating out of there, of which I guess I'm currently the most famous to the extent that I am. And so that's all of my prepared stuff. So I think at this point we can open it up for people who have questions. Okay, got a first question here, which is, how did I research Irish, Scottish, Russian mafias? Well, there's a great book by an author called T.J. English that's called Paddywhacked, The History of Irish Organized Crime in America, that's a great source. And there's a lot of books out there about this material. And I already read a lot, and I read a lot of stuff about crime. Okay, then I've got a question. What lead me to change the book titles to stop referring to drinks? I actually haven't. Every title is a drink, and the recipe is within the title. A black magic, like for example, like book 6, is actually any number of several different drink recipes. There's about 4 different cocktails that I found called black magics online, and 1 hangover remedy. And so I included all of the recipes because Black Magic is a book about stage magicians and misdirection and deception. And so I liked having a kind of a choose your own drink for that. Aquarium, book 12 that I'm working on. An aquarium is a disturbingly blue drink that is based off of Curacao liqueur. A flashback is a Gatorade vodka ginger ale cocktail that I see some people face palming and putting their hands over their mouths in the window. Yeah, it sounds appalling, doesn't it? But it fits both thematically and recipe-wise because some of the soldiers involved, that would be the sort of thing that you'd mix up on an army base. You've got your energy drinks lying around, you got your Gatorade, and you got some vodka, so somebody somewhere is going to think, what would happen if we just mix those together? And oh, heck, let's throw in some ginger ale too and see what happens. And that brings me to one thing that I was going to mention, which is thematic resonance. Thematic resonance is when a title isn't just a title, when it refers to a drink, and in every book, the drink itself appears at least once. Sometimes the main character drinks it, sometimes not, but somebody does. But also, there's some theme that plays through the name of the drink. For instance, Irish Car Bomb, book 2. An Irish car bomb is of Guinness, of course, and then you take a shot glass that's half Irish whiskey and half Irish cream, so it's all Irish, and you drop the shot glass into the beer glass, and then you're supposed to drink it as fast as possible because the cream starts curdling immediately. My understanding is it's a fantastic way to get really drunk really fast. But this is also a drink that was named in reference to the Troubles in Ireland. And the obviously car bombs that the IRA would use. And one of the main characters in the book is a former IRA member who built bombs for them back in the 1980s before he came to the United States. And so there's lots of different ways that the Irish car bomb idea piles up within the story. And I try to do that in each of the stories. So anyways, additional questions. Let's see, I see some comments in the chat, some spoilery comments about the endings. Okay, got a recommendation on books. That's always good. Okay, other questions? More drink recipes, yes. By the way, I'm never going to run out of drink recipe titles for books. That is a tremendous thing. There's thousands of drinks probably, and a lot of them are good names for mystery novels. Okay. Oh, lots of questions here. Okay, my editor is my publisher, Ben Farrow. And he works with Holly Turlington, who he just took on recently. Okay, I thought this might come up. Given the police racial tensions happening in the country right now, do you see any of the stories involving that topic? And now we're on very delicate ground. I try not to be too political in my writing for several reasons. I mean, for the obvious selfish commercial thing, I don't want to alienate my readership, but also I am writing principally for entertainment and escapism. And with the year that we've just come off of, this was not a year that I really wanted to address in my fictional world too many of the things that were happening in the real world. The books are set in a time that's never specifically stated, but it starts in 2013 and is now at this point in the narrative in mid 2014. Obviously, you can't get away from the fact that there's a lot of stress and tension between police and communities, and it's a difficult and awful thing. I'm not going to get political here in my talk right now. I am just going to say that my opinion is that police represent ultimately and reflect the communities that they serve. And a problem with the police is often indicative of a problem within the wider community that needs to be addressed. And I don't think that there's any easy, obvious solutions to problems of police violence or racial discrimination or anti-police sentiment, because it's all tied up together. And unfortunately, a lot of what's said on the topic on both sides is, while it may be accurate, is often not helpful. And it's not enough to be right. You have to be right in a way that can convince people that to change something. And something I learned from Ingrid about animal training that also applies to people is positive reinforcement. And that my hope is by modeling good behavior within the police, I can help to kind of nudge things in that direction a little bit. That's my only real ambition there. That said, there are dirty cops in the series. Some of whom have been already exposed and published and punished. I said published, exposed and punished. One of the things I'm trying to explore in this series is the fact that some crooks are better than some cops as people. Not all cops are good people. Not all criminals are bad people. And it's complicated and often very fuzzy. So anyways, now I've got a question. Next question. Aside from Erin herself, do you have a particular favorite other character to write? Corky. James Corcoran. I love writing that guy. He's fun. He's witty. He's charming. He's absolutely shameless. And he's got that Irish accent and sort of lilt to his speech that I can just taste when it comes off of my fingertips. I think Ingrid would probably want me to do a Corky impression right about now, so I guess I'd ask you to forgive me in advance. Here's sort of how I hear Corky. Well, love, I can't believe you brought me into this. Right, flattered, obviously, and there's probably some fair colleens on this call that I'd love to be better acquainted with. But, really, do we have to do this over the internet? Can't we all meet down at the pub? So, that's Corky, as I experience him. Yeah, he's fun, and he makes me laugh when I write him sometimes. But I like all of my characters. I love Carlisle, the other Irishman. I like Vic, the surly Russian, and I love Vic and his banter with Erin, how they have this kind of belligerent brother-sister tension that always runs through their communication, that there's no sexual romantic element to it really at all, even though they're male-female and people might think that would be there, but there isn't. Really, it's brother by another mother. And once they understand each other there, they give each other a lot of crap, and they just bounce off each other well. Pet peeve about Carlisle. The Irish do indeed say darling. And in fact, when I read Carlisle in my head, that's how I say it. I've gone back and forth about how much accent to actually put in the writing and how much to let people hear in their own head. And sometimes I hit it where I want to and sometimes not. Let's see, backing up. Okay, did I spend time in New York City learning how to learn the setting? Oh, another big elephant in the room. I have never been to New York City in my life. not once. Ingrid's been for a couple of days. Brought me back an NYPD t-shirt to honor the occasion, which I thought about wearing for the event, but I thought I'd get cold. I have read a lot about New York City. I spend a lot of time writing. I check the neighborhoods and I look at Google Street cameras every time I mention a street name and an intersection. I make sure that everything happens in the correct neighborhoods, and I often am looking at the actual buildings that I have in mind when I write them, but I am not a New Yorker. So that begs the question then, why New York? And the answer to that really is sort of circular. It's New York because it's Erin O'Reilly's story, and Erin's from New York. Ultimately, a lot of the story comes down to American immigrant experiences, and a lot of the theme of the series is about the Irish. There's a joke in Irish Car Bomb that I did not make up, but I can't attribute it, unfortunately, because I don't remember where I saw it the first time. That is, if it weren't for the Irish, New York wouldn't have a police force. On the other hand, it might not need one. And so there's this dichotomy of the Irish in New York, that a lot of them coming in very poor, no opportunities, and a great distrust of the government that they had learned from being an oppressed colony of the British took to crime. However, a lot of them also thought, well, if you can't beat the establishment, become the establishment. And they started off as patrol cops, firefighters, and low-level political ward bosses, and worked their way up until John F. Kennedy became president. and so the Irish, as T.J. English argues in Paddywhacked, gradually move out of organized crime as a culture when they take over the country. There's another joke that says that God created hangovers so the Irish wouldn't be able to conquer the world, which is an unkind thing to say. But they're a fascinating people. I've learned a lot about the Irish and the way that they've integrated into American society. And I've learned a lot about the Troubles also when I was researching the Irish Republican Army, which left me with a lot of sympathy for guys that are, well, basically terrorists. It's complicated, is what it comes down to. Let's see. Vic. Will he maybe have a romance? Well, Vic had a little bit of a romance in White Russian that doesn't go great for anyone who's read that book. Vic is a character that I am planning on writing a spin-off from his point of view at some point. Probably what I tend to do with the spin-offs is write a prequel. I think I'll do a prequel from when he was working with ESU, the Emergency Services Unit for New York that they have instead of the SWAT team. There's another research thing. I initially was writing about the NYPD and said something about the SWAT team, and then found out that New York doesn't have a SWAT team. They have ESU, and so on. It's not CSI for crime scene investigation. No, it's called CSU. It's the crime scene unit. And it's little things that a lot of people won't notice, but the people who notice it, it's really going to bother them. So you want to get as few of them wrong as possible. Okay. Then I have a question that it looks like Ingrid actually handled already in chat. How does Ingrid handle things when I'm absorbed in writing? She sounds like a supportive, wonderful wife, but wonder how she copes. She says that she's my biggest fan. And yes, part of my writing process that I neglected to mention is that whenever I write a chapter or a section, I read it out loud to her. And reading it out loud helps me a lot. It helps with the flow of the story and making sure that it sounds the way I think it does. It catches a lot of my initial typos and screw-ups, and I get an initial reaction to, does this really work? And since Ingrid has unique insight into Erin's character and personality, she'll sometimes say something like, you know, I don't think she'd really say that or do that. She'd say this other thing. And I remember at one point working on, I think it was Flashback, Erin is between meals. And so I just turned to Ingrid, who was sitting on the couch, and I said, okay, Erin's got to get her food out of the vending machine. What's she getting? And so we talked about that. And I said, I figure probably a Diet Coke because she watches her calories but loves her caffeine. Yeah, probably. And then Ingrid said something savory, not sweet. And I said, potato chips. And Ingrid said, Diet Coke and potato chips. Oh, Erin. But she didn't disagree. So I've had a suggestion to ask people who have read the series to post in the chat who their favorite character is and why. So that could be an interesting thing if people want to mention that. I'm always interested in hearing that. I have a note. I sense that the relationship between Erin and her dad is also complex. Yes, it is. Erin's father is a retired New York police officer who never made detective. He was a patrol cop, a flat-foot gumshoe his whole career. And so he provides the sort of older policeman perspective. And he's the guy who always wanted one of his sons to be a cop, but his daughter ended up doing it instead. And he's tremendously proud of her and protective of her and always worries about her. And so he's able to provide some useful insight into cases, often from the perspective of somebody who's done it longer and just recognizes the feel of the street. Sometimes he knows people from his time on the force that are useful, and he worries. He worries a lot. His usual first question on the phone when she calls him is, everything okay? And he expects an honest answer. I like the father-daughter dynamic there. Erin has 3 brothers herself and a father, which, as I've noticed before, is the exact same dynamic as in the TV series Blue Bloods. There's 3 brothers and a sister, and the classic movie The Godfather, in which there's Michael, Sonny, and Fredo, the brothers, and then the sister Connie and the old patriarch. And I like that parallel because criminals and cops occupy the same world, and they often understand each other better than either of them understands civilians, or vice versa. And I think that's always an interesting thing to explore. As anyone who's followed the series to date will know, I'm trying so hard not to step on the spoiler wagon. But Erin gets involved with organized crime in some complicated ways, starting in book 2 and really progressing all the way through to the present. And that will continue through the end of the series as she tries to figure out a balance point between doing the right thing by the law, doing the right thing by herself, and doing the right thing for the people that she cares about. And unfortunately, sometimes those things become mutually exclusive, and then you have to choose. I've heard it said that as a role-playing game master, the best way to foster character development is to find out what a character won't do and then figure out a way to make them do it and see what happens. And you really find out things about characters in those situations. So, let's see.
Stephen?
Yes.
Jamie.
Mm-hmm.
I want to, before everybody kind of like shuts down, I want to, we can keep going. We can keep going, but I just don't want everybody to leave before I have a chance to thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to me just babble on for an hour.
It's been more than babbling. Yeah. It's been very insightful on many levels. Because I had some questions that people asked, and I think that this chat went pretty well, this chat format. What do you think, Stephen?
I think it went well. No complaints at all. You've been a great audience. So
I also want to give I'd like to give a mention for another missed program that you might not know about, Stephen. It's going to be on February 6th. Have you, Priscilla Patton, who's a local resident, has also written a mystery series.
All right. Well, I will look into that. I do not know her personally, nor am I familiar with her work.
Okay. Well, let me hold. She's written she's just published book 2 in the Twin Cities mystery series, and her latest book is called Should Grace Fail? And I'm going to be hosting a talk with Priscilla Saturday, February 6th. Look for the information, and it's going to be about her mystery series. And I'm going to just invite everybody here to attend that as well, because she also has a background in English literature, which is interesting. And so I just wanted to get those in. We can keep going, but I just wanted to mention those things.
Sure. Got a question. Are my books in the library? I think Jamie's better equipped to answer that than I am. I believe so.
Yes, but I will tell you that I trotted down to content books, and they don't have your first love in.
Okay.
And in fact,
Well, it just came out, so it may
yeah,
just be.
and in fact, Flashback, that's also on order. But
Okay.
We have all of them, and we'll keep getting them.
All right. All right. Other questions? Anybody? Okay. I got a shout out from the Northfield retirement community, so thank you for listening in. Appreciated. Got a shout out from retired law enforcement, so that's great. So we did have a cop on the call, apparently. Which types of books make the most money for you? Most per unit. I make the most off of the hardcover sales because they're the most expensive and I get a percentage. The most profitable things for me, format for me though, is by far electronic books. We do something like 95% of our sales via electronic platform. That appears to be what the business is currently, especially for somebody working through a small publisher that does not have a brick and mortar bookstore presence. And unfortunately, you can't walk into a Barnes & Noble and get my books at this time. You got to get them online. But in the time of COVID, that's, I guess, not really much of a negative. So yeah, the ebooks are what make it possible for me to do this as a career currently. Okay. Ingrid's reminding us that it's important to read the books in order. I do again recommend, yes, to start with book one. It's the cheapest too, so again, no excuse. I will say that my personal favorite of the series, to preempt a question that might be on people's mind, Car Bomb. Because of the way that it introduces two of my favorite characters in the series, Corky and Carlisle. And I like the feel of it. And it sets up basically the whole rest of the series. How long does it take me to write each book on average? Currently, with doing it as an occupation, my aim is to write about 1,500 words a day, 5 days a week, with the books being between 45 and 50,000 words. So that works out to a little over 30 writing days per draft. So that works out to about a month and a half of total time for the draft. Now, of course, the rough draft does not mean that the book's finished. That was the fun part. That was in some ways the easy part. Then I go back and hit it with the editor hammer. And here's where my lack of detailed outlining comes back to bite me, because I do sometimes need to tweak things earlier on to make sure that they line up with everything that happens later. Make sure that the timeline all jigs, that I'm not repeating myself significantly. And something I've noticed that I do, which is something that almost every writer does, is I have writing tics. There'll be a given phrase or word that I'll realize that I've used an awful lot without meaning to. And so I try to eliminate as many of those as possible. I've noticed that when I'm editing, I almost never add more things in. I'm almost always taking things out. Excess words or redundancies or just dead weight, paring it down to kind of the bare bones. Stephen King, who you may have heard of, said in his book on writing, when you write the story. When you rewrite, you take out what is not the story. And this is Stephen King, who writes these enormous books, so I don't know, you maybe need to take that with a little grain of salt, but I try to do that. I want people to enjoy them. I think that the best criticism that I can hear from people sometimes is if they say, I wish it had gone on longer. I mean, that's not a bad thing to hear. And I know that the books are not long books as such. And that is what it is. They're likely to continue to be about the same length. But overall, the series tells a much longer story as well that I hope will work out for people. All right. So final thoughts, anybody? I'd like to also give a hello to those of my relatives that I haven't seen face-to-face in a long time who sat in on the call. I see my Aunt Marjorie Ann there waving to me, and my Aunt Susan there, and various other folks. Is that Bobby Peterson there? I think that might be Bobby Peterson. Yep, mother of my growing up best friend, and so on. So I see several of my former teachers amongst the crowd here. So that's great to see all of you. I hope that you're all well and safe. This has been.
Are you going to be is this recorded? Because Elizabeth had to go to her son's basketball game and she was really upset.
Well, there's a creepy little indicator in the lower left corner of the screen, a big red circle that says recording and 3 ominous dots. So I believe the answer to that is yes. Jamie's giving me a thumbs up. I think it might be audio only recording rather than video, probably because that would be a tremendously large video file otherwise. And Mel Hughes says, final thought, keep writing, got a real gift. And she thanks me for Mel. Is Mel female or male? I don't know actually. Doesn't matter. Mel says, thanks me for developing my gift. What's in the works after Erin? That's a good question. Well, there is an entire spin-off novel that I have written that takes place in the same world as Erin's. So some of the same characters are in it. Erin herself appears very briefly. She's in chapter 1, and she's in the last chapter of it. That story is not a mystery. It is a romantic thriller. It's called Tequila Sunrise, so I did keep the naming convention, and it is a romantic thriller starring James Corcoran. So that's definitely a different thing. I said that Corky was my favorite character to write, and this is not from Corky's point of view, but he's one of the 2 central characters. So that will be coming out in the not too distant future, but we do need to make sure that it jigs up with the main storyline a little later on. It may be about a year before that one sees the light of day. But I want to explore the idea of spin-off stories and just telling other stories than Erin's within the same genre and world. I also have some other projects. There'll be a Christmas story that we're planning on releasing in time for Christmas next year. We wanted to get it out this year, but it just didn't work. Various things got in the way, like disease epidemics and political chaos and what have you. But that one is a totally different story about it's a story about a carpenter who falls in love with a young woman who turns out pregnant in modern day America. It's a Christmas story. And I'm very happy with it and excited about it, but it's, again, very different. But I think it has some things to say about trust and faith and love. Then I'll just keep writing things and see what leads to what. Erin will keep me out of trouble for the next few years at least. And keep me off the streets, which is what a good detective should do with a troublemaker like me. All right. Anybody else?
Thanks once again.
I think that's it then.
Thanks, Stephen, and we're going to have you back.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind. I'll have to think of some new things to say. Yeah. So
thanks,
and thank you all again.
This is a real positive way to start out the new year. Yeah.
All right. So I'll bid you all a good day. And again, everyone stay safe, be careful. There's a disease out there that is dangerous and people are dying of it. And the world's a scary place. But I think that's why we need to hold on to positivity and just try to be good people too. When in doubt, be kind. I think that's always good. So I will bid you farewell.